Have you wondered how an interrogation would go if the criminal was smarter than the cops? You must have heard of good cop, bad cop, and other such techniques used during interrogation to extract a confession. Thanks to true crime documentaries and the numerous shows centered around police departments, watch the video to find out about a dangerous criminal with an IQ of 200. After alarms went off at a local 7-Eleven in Georgia signaling an armed robbery, the cops came to know that the suspect had already fled. Upon searching the entire neighborhood for suspects, they heard commotion from one house and found a heroin addict armed with a gun, who already had a criminal record of his own. Without further evidence, they arrested Jeff Pearson and brought him to be interrogated, without knowing it would be a long day ahead of them. If Jeff was as cooperative as the cops had wished, he would have been intimidated and confessed to the armed robbery, for which he would be behind bars for at least 10 years, apart from being heavily fined. As soon as the policeman entered the small interrogation room where Jeff had already been brought, he asked whether or not he was under arrest, and why had he been brought in. The officer tried to deflect the questions for the time being, knowing how he had hit the bullseye with this. Although most of us have seen arrests on television and heard the part where they read out the rights to the suspect, most people are so panicked that they don't realize that they are basically being told that unless they want to purposefully incriminate themselves, they better keep quiet, up until the lawyer shows up. Jeff implemented the same tactic where he refused to answer for a few minutes, even ignoring the snarky remarks. After testing the cop's patience, he decided to dish out some snark of his own, and ultimately walked off to his cell after confirming that he was under arrest, thus bringing the first round of interrogation to an end. The next round of interrogation began with Jeff asking for a coke and methadone, and accepted his addiction, and ongoing withdrawals when the officer asked what he wanted it for. Quite bold, right? But wouldn't him being a junkie have any negative effect on the interrogation? Let's find out. Jeff vented his frustration about being at the wrong place at the right time, and then promptly returned to his previous stance of not talking to the cops. He called the officer out of his bluff because he had caught on to the fact that they wouldn't be trying so hard to get him to talk if they had any conclusive evidence at all. The officer was trying to talk politely, hoping that he would gradually shift the statements to a choice between two statements, both of which would constitute an admission of guilt. The officer is following the famous technique that was developed by Reed, but the ironical part is that the technique is only good for cornering people, as the man who developed this technique ended up extracting a false confession. Pearson not only recognized this but also refused to let the officer get to step one itself. He navigated the entire situation with a cool head, which is quite rare, but to do so while facing severe withdrawals is an impressive feat. He insisted on getting a lawyer and watched as the officer became more and more desperate due to the time constraints. So Jeff sat there sipping his coke while the cop tried to threaten him with evidence. From the moment Jeff explicitly asked for a lawyer, the police was not allowed to interrogate him in the absence of a lawyer. And yet the cop repeatedly violated his rights while trying to question him, and eventually came to a point of bargain, offering to put in a good word with his parole officer if he helped him out with details of the case. What good is the promise of a golden cage if you'll end up staying locked inside for the rest of your life? Keep watching to see Jeff's reaction to this proposal. Jeff had his eye on the clock while the cops tried to intimidate him by asking about the gun and threatened him by talking about the tough time he would face after being put back in jail. Instead of giving in, Jeff simply asked for candy, and when the cop refused, he got up and demanded to be taken to the hospital. The cops had already violated his rights by denying his medical needs, and Jeff was finally released from custody after 12 hours. That's all for this video, and if you needed further proof of how unbothered Jeff was throughout the entire matter, the viral video of his interview was first uploaded to his own YouTube channel.